Ave hai chi bum bai chi bum bum. It is Christmas time 2021, and this is the first interview in my whole life. I was born on May 20, 1937 in a little bitty town of Mammolsheim in Germany. My mom, her name was Katharina Bommelsheim, and my father's name was Gustav Josef Mutig, born in Frankfurt. She was born in 1903 and my father 1896. Yeah. They met at a dance in Mammolsheim, and my mom said Gustav just wouldn't leave her alone, so they finally decided to get married. So they got married on November 4th, 1921.
There are 6 siblings, yes? Six children.
I have 6 children. My oldest one, Martha, was born in 1922, and my sister Marianne, 1924. My brother Helmut in 1928, and my sister Helma in 1930, myself 37, and my youngest brother in October 41. There probably would be more had my father came back from Russia. Yeah. Must have been a loving couple. Action, second part. Pink cheeks? All right. Shoot, Rachel. My mom was a very reliable person, down to earth, didn't have a big sense of humor. The only sense of humor I remember, the joke was that the gate was open and she said, go outside and close the gate, there is a draft. That's the only thing I remember about Mama. Other than that, she was just there, always there for us children, always reliable. She was just a hard-working, wonderful, warm person. My dad, I don't remember much, but what I was told that he had a huge sense of humor, and he was very, very much liked by the family and by people in our village who talked about him and missing him. Yeah. But other than that, personally, I don't have that many memories. And the few I had, I mentioned before in part 1. My oldest sister, Martha, was a very reliable person who helped my mom out with going to, like, the Bürgermeisteramt, some paperwork needed to be done, and organizations like food organizations, and she was really, really good at that. Marianne was a very nurturing sister. Actually, Mama said, when I was born, she took over. And she was at that time about 13. So in a way, she was like my second mom. And then Helmut, I just always admire him because he had a huge sense of humor. He told us stories at night, really scary ones. He turned the light off and he told my little brother Gernot and me some really scary stories about giants who ate little children and stuff like that. And then Helma, she was a teenager at that time, and she was sort of a pain in the butt. But I think it probably was the other way around, that I was a pain in the butt to her, because I followed her around and she just wanted to be on her own. And then there was my little brother Gernot, who at that time, of course, I had the most fun with, because we did everything together. We basically grew up together because everybody else was so much older.
You were very young during the war. Will you tell me just a little bit about some of your memories?
I can do that. What I do remember is like the planes coming from the north, flying to Frankfurt and bombing Frankfurt. And I remember as children, we knew when the planes were loaded with bombs or when they already dropped them, because there was a different hum to them. There was a real deep hum when they came to start bombing, and when they flew back from Frankfurt, there was that real high hum, and they flew much higher. And I remember in the next village, bombs were dropped there, and I remember hearing horses screaming. They must have gotten hit there. And in our village, a few bombs fell, and one was like 2 or 3 houses up. And there was a big building with 3 apartments in front and 1 in the back. And that big bomb came down on the 3 apartments and killed everybody in there. And the people in the back jumped out the window and came to our bunker, where we all huddled. The bunker was like 3 family or 4 worked together. That bunker was built into a hill and supported by beams and had some little benches on the side, but it was very narrow and damp and cold. But when the alarms came and we ran into the bunker, everybody carried something that was important to them. Now I remember Frau Paff next door, she always had a tray of silver on her lap.
Yeah.
My mama took clothes for the children, warm clothes, and probably some food. But the funniest was my sister Martha. She put all her hats on her head because they were very important for her. So she came out with those towering hats up there, and everybody, of course, laughed about it. Now, Marianne, of course, carried me around, or a Genote. That was just her, and the rest, I don't remember about Helmut and Helma that much. Yeah. But we all were huddling in that bunker, and I remember the adults told us to pray. Actually, my brother Gernot was born October 28 in 1941. And I remember Mama and Papa bringing him home from the hospital. And I remember they had that little blanket around him, and I was able to peek and look at this little boy. But shortly after that, my father went to Russia into the war, and he was killed in February 1942. Of course, my mom was very concerned, and I'm sure his whole family. But I remember that Mama said, he said, "Have you ever heard of a Gustav Mutig being killed?" That was his sense of humor and his way of doing things and saying things.
What part of Russia?
He was very close to Moscow, in Vyazma. They were building streets there.
Yeah. And you said he had an injury, right?
Well, in World War I, he was injured in the upper leg, and he had a limp, and he couldn't move very fast. So the partisans came and pushed the Germans back, and the army, of course, and they were all loaded real quick in a truck. And my father was following the truck, and they couldn't stop because there was everybody else gets killed, or let's leave one person behind. So Herr Greve, who lived a house underneath us, he was there, and he told my mom that he was running after the truck, and they were trying to help him but couldn't. And he was shot there. He was killed right there. and everybody else in the truck survived at that point.
And how did you all get through that time?
It was tough. We were always hungry. I remember walking home from school and just fainting. And so we gathered food wherever we could. We had chestnut trees in fall, they were loaded with chestnuts. So my brother Gernot and I, we took a sack and we just picked up chestnuts, and Mama cooked them at night, and we just had a feast. And to this very day, I love chestnuts. And we also went to look for mushrooms, of course, and berries, and we also climbed in people's gardens and stole fruit. Hunger hurts. I remember Gernot and I were in bed at night, and we cried because our stomach hurt so bad. And Mama went downstairs to get for each of us a crust of bread, and she told us to keep it in our mouth as long as we can. So it kind of calmed the hunger pains down a little bit.
Yeah.
I remember one night, or maybe more nights, my brother Gernot and I, we went to the fields and gathered some trapped grains the farmers left behind, and you weren't allowed to do it. So we went there at night when the moon was shining and gathered as much as we could, and Mama roasted them and used them, I assume, for bread. Hunger was definitely very prevalent. I remember the family huddled around the radio, and all of a sudden there was joyous voices, and they say the Americans crossed the Rhine River, which meant our part of the country will be occupied by Americans. And I remember going on the street, watching that convoy coming from Frankfurt, and for the first time in my life I saw a black soldier. White teeth, white eyes, smiling, and they threw chocolate down for me and a loaf of bread. And everybody was waving, and it was very, very emotional to me. I stood there all by myself, imagine that little girl in ragged clothes, and waving at the American soldiers. And thanks to an American President Truman and the Marshall Plan, after the war, they're starting to feed us in school. They had a huge kettle there, and they were cooking pea soups and sweet noodle soups and stuff like that. And I had a friend down the street, or my mom had a friend, his name was Herr Völke, and he made us all a little container with a handle on it so we could carry that to school and got our Schulspeisung, which was then our lunch. And that was a big part of survival at that time. Without that, I don't know how we could make it, because you couldn't buy anything. The garden was only so big, Mama could only grow so much, and we were 7 people. So, yes, thank you to President Truman and the Marshall Plan.
Of the brothers and sisters, 3 of you ended up leaving Germany, right?
Yes. Helma was the first. She turned 18 in Bremerhaven in 1948 and left to America, came to America. My sister Marianne in 49 went to Australia, which took at that time 6 weeks on a ship. She was married at that time, went with her husband. Well, I fell in love with an American soldier after my divorce from Gerald's father. So in 1963, in September, Gerald and I boarded a plane, Pan American, to fly to New York. In New York, I met my future husband, his parents, and for the first time after 16 years, I saw my sister Helma. And I remember the first thing I said to her, "Oh my gosh, you look just like Mama." And I think she liked that. So I moved in with my sister until I got married a few months later. And we just had a lot of good times together. We had a lot of catching up to do, because at that time, except for a letter here and there, we didn't have much contact. So Timothy was still at home. He was just a little boy, a little younger than Gerald. And those two boys got together and grew up to be friends for the rest of their lives. Elma and I was very, very close for many, many years. I don't think a day went by when we didn't call each other or saw each other, especially later on where we lived fairly close together. I lived in Pennsylvania for a year until we moved to New York, and after that to Houston, Texas, St. Louis, Missouri, Portland, Oregon, and now I am in Vancouver, Washington. Both my boys live nearby now. Gerald only 5 miles and David a little further. He still lives in Oregon. And we get together as much as we can. I enjoy my boys tremendously and their families. Yeah, it's just great to have children and family, and I just love every minute of it.
Tell me a little bit about your aunts and uncles or any extended family.
My mom had 2 siblings, an Aunt Gretchen, who was quite a bit older than her. She was a very stern, eccentric lady. Very lovable, but very strict and stern. And then she had a brother named George. He was a grumpy old man. He used to come to visit Mama, and you could count on, he came always around dinner time, and he just sat himself at a table and expected to be served food. I mean, he was kind of a nice guy, but like I said, a bit on the grumpy side. And then my father, he had 3 sisters and 1 brother. The oldest one was Annie. Annie died in the same year my father got killed in 1942. She was a big supporter of my mom to help out with the children, to pick up the baby, which was Gernot, and just help out any way she could. And then she died in the same year as my dad. Plus, Mama's mom died at the same year, so it must have been really, really rough on her. So that was Aunt Annie. And she was married to Uncle Valentin, who was a very nice, is that the right word? Joyful man.
Yeah.
And then there was Tante Mada, who was my very favorite. I used to visit Tante Mada almost every weekend and every school vacation. She always picked me up on the train station in Niederhöchstadt. After I was about 7 or 8, I was allowed to visit her by myself, going to the train to Kronberg and drive up there. And then she picked me up, and we always stopped at a bakery to get some pastries or brötchens.
Nice.
And then we walked to her sister, Tante Lina, and Tante Lina was already waiting for us by the gate because she had some geese, and the geese, they were mean as a junkyard dog. They had to be locked up, and they were screaming at you and trying to pinch you. Then she locked them up. She also had a goat, a cat named Mibby, and 2 dogs. I loved to visit there. And then she had a cuckoo clock. Now, when I was a little girl, I was sitting in front of that cuckoo clock and wait for the cuckoo to come out. Well, Tante Mada and her always sat down for coffee, and I'm sure she made something different for me. And Uncle Fritz came home, and it was just a very pleasant visit. And Tante Lina was a very quiet, sweet lady. It was just a cute smile. Very, very nice memories. And then there was Uncle Franz, who was the only brother of my father, who also was a very nice man, very kind, very gentle, and a big sense of humor too, in a very quiet way. He could tell you stories, and you think he's serious, and it turned out to be a joke. So I have very, very, very nice memories of my aunts and uncles. There's quite a few cousins left yet. I had a cousin named Walter, Hermann, Norbert, and Elke. I had a cousin Eberhard. And I guess that's it, really. Yeah, I think that's it. There weren't too many children.
Yeah.
Like I said, Tante Mada,
Yeah.
she was my main aunt,
Yeah.
and I just loved her.
Yeah. Nice.
She worked for a farmer, actually. She was a, sort of part of the household. So I spent lots of nights, like I said before, in the farmhouse there. And of course, they had cows and pigs and chickens and dogs and horses and a donkey. And I always feel good around animals. And that was a wonderful place to be. And we always sat around there for dinner. And Frau Becker and Herr Becker, they were very funny. Herr Becker had false teeth. And for my benefit, he always dropped his teeth. And I was so shocked. I always say, Herr Becker, would you please drop your teeth? I want to see it. And they just laughed, you know, they slapped their legs. They were just a fun couple. And Tante Mada worked there basically all her life. Had her own apartment, took care of her father until he died, my grandfather. Just wonderful memories, absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. And you knew your grandparents?
Barely. I knew my father's father, who died maybe when I was 8 or 9. And of course he lived in Niederhöchstadt, which was a bit of a distance. I knew him not too well, but I knew him, yes. And on my mom's side, my grandfather died a long time before I was born. And like I said before, her grandma died in 1942, when I was a little girl. But her last and only really good memory of her was that Mama and I went to visit her. She also lived in Mammolsheim. And Grandma was already at that time sick in bed, but she knitted me a sweater. And she gave me that sweater. I still remember it was a light beige, and she had all kinds of flowers crocheted on it, or stitched on it, with little animals and flowers, and I just so treasured that. This is my only bigger memory of my grandma, just very sweet. Tante Mada never was married, so she came almost weekly to Mammolsheim, sometimes twice, and during the war or end of the war, she always had something she more or less probably stole from the farmer. Like she had like 3 eggs in her purse, or a quarter pound of butter, or something she took or saved up for herself and brought it to my mom. And I think a big reason for us to survive was really Tante Mada helping out wherever she could. Plus she always had something in her purse for Gernot and me. And when we came, we couldn't wait to go in her purse, because she said, there's something in there for you, you know, whatever it was. And if it was only one piece of candy, it was always a surprise in there. Until way in my adulthood. Very special lady.
Yeah, from such a young age to have such challenging circumstances. I always think of you as being so bright and loving and very affectionate. What do you think, if you could attribute some of that to something as...
I know exactly. I always wanted to be like Tante Mada.
Yeah.
For me, the biggest wish was to be a tante to whoever.
Yeah.
And be a lot like her. Be happy around people, be friendly, and smile, make little jokes, and she was really my role model.
Yeah.
And for me, the biggest pleasure is if people like you, Timothy, Birgit, and whoever call me Tante. To me, it is a compliment.
Yeah.
So I love to be a Tante. Well, it's Christmas time. It's 2021. I want to wish all my family very, very Merry Christmas. And I love you all.
Oh, we love you too, very much.
I had a lot more ornaments. I just put up a few. It's just too much.
Yeah.
I kind of like a little bit simplicities.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What's on the
like those.
top of the tree?
Pardon me?
What's on the top?
It's just a little doggy angel, I think. And I think of Binchen now, you know.
Yeah.
She's up there somewhere, you know, over the rainbow.
Yeah.
One day some police, I thought, what the heck? Am I driving too fast? Isn't that beautiful here?
It is.
Da 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 dee da dee da 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 dee da da. Flammkuchen, yay! Rachel likes flammkuchen. Christmas in Killarney with all of the folks at home. Actually, it's Christmas in Vancouver with my favorite people here. Ah!
Thank you.
I remember I had a friend, she stole onions and ate them like an apple. I didn't try that. La 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 la, 5 golden rings, 2 of 3